Hi everyone. I have just been in kind of a video making mood today, I guess. I'm avoiding work, so I'm going to make another video. And this one is going to be about two tarot decks that I don't see get a lot of attention, but I think that are really actually quite cool in their execution of traditional tarot structure. The first is this one called the Science Tarot, and I would have never thought that I would have actually really enjoyed this, but I do. I think it makes very good use of scientific concepts and applying them to different ideas found within the traditional tarot structure, and I just think it's very well done, so I wanted to share it with you. It comes in this sort of sturdy little box, two-part box that comes apart, and it also comes with this little booklet so that you can sort of look up the scientific concepts if you're not familiar with them. It was created by these people here at the top: Logan Osteja Daniel, Martin Azevedo, and Raven Hanna, PhD. I'm not sure if Raven Hanna is the only one who has a PhD, if they all do, but it was created in 2010, and different artists each did different parts of the work itself. So the deck, and I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but I just want to show you what I like about it. So there, each suit has different colors in the borders, which is kind of garish, but I think works well for the deck itself. It helps you immediately see how many of each kind you have. The major arcana are in this green, and most of the major arcana are big scientific principles. So you have things like, the Fool is student, or learning itself. The Magician, here, actually I'm going to tilt them over here. The Magician is the ribosome. Okay, I actually had to look up Benzene Dream because I didn't know what it was the first time that I read it, and now I actually should have looked at it for this video because I can't remember either. So let me show you the major arcana that I like. Gregor Mendel's Peas as the Empress, which I think is so clever in talking about the kind of creativity in his thinking that she usually represents, and then also the sort of just raw generation of materials that the Empress oftentimes works with. Crystallization as the Emperor, which is perfect for the kind of rigid structure and law that the Emperor tends to represent. Of course, the Hierophant is the Professor, and the Lover is the binary star. I'm just going to skip to the ones that I really enjoy so I can fit both decks onto this video. Nuclear Force to Strength. I love that Justice is the conservation of energy, so that, energy is never lost, it is simply transformed, but there's always the balance of it in the universe itself. The Hanged Man as potential energy is wonderful. You sort of have here in the back the shadow of the traditional Hanged Man that this rock is projecting, and it's sort of precariously placed on this other rock, and so the potential for it is tremendous, but it's all potential right now. It's not moving, which I think is a nice embodiment of the Hanged Man's sort of suspension and waiting. Phase transition, of course, for death. So liquid, solid, and gas, all sorts of transformations that death represents. Some of them are a little bit lame, like Temperance as the tolerance for uncertainty, which is an important scientific concept, I'm sure, but it doesn't seem to fit in as well as things like, phase transition is, to me, not in the same league as tolerance of uncertainty. That's not a scientific principle as much as the creators of the deck would hope for it to be. So, you have the myth of the elephant and the different people thinking that an elephant is different things depending on what they feel. Or unquestioning for the devil, which again is it's a good assignment for the devil. It just doesn't seem to be as in the same league as some of the other specific things. The atom bomb is the tower, or this one, for example, compassionate action. We definitely need more of that probably in contemporary practices of science, but it just doesn't work for me in that regard. But that doesn't keep me from liking the deck. I still think that the deck is well done in applying scientific principles where they can. Especially things like, so back to, natural selection for judgment is great, I think, and goes back to the story of the moths in England and the factories that produced a lot of smoke and smog, and so different moths survived in different conditions depending on what color they were. Grand Unified Theory is the world. What I really enjoy about this deck is how it treats the swords. And some of you, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I don't really like how occultists and esotericists and other individuals have treated the swords in the past. Much of the swords tradition in the tarot is passed down from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they didn't like the swords because the swords to them represented the rational mind, and at the time that they were working, rationality had a hegemonic dominance over society. Rationality was prized, and they were trying to transcend it through mystical experience. So the swords got painted negatively as a result of that, and it is one of my big missions with the tarot to sort of rectify the swords and talk about what ideas they can represent neutrally. And I think this deck does a nice job of that. Now, I'm not going to suggest that science has no ideology or that science is value-free, because of course it's value-laden. But I do think that this deck and the scientific concepts it used to illustrate these theories is really well done and is worth looking at. So you have the ace, which is reductionism, highly theoretical thinking, which I think is a nice way of capturing the abstract thought that the ace of swords to me represents. The two of swords is action. So really, I think, is a clever way of capturing the notion of pushback and opposition. That, to me, the two of swords typically represents the blocking of the way. It's usually that woman standing in front of the sea with the swords blocking her path. So for each action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Oh, and that's the thing. Each of the suits is a different scientific concept. So all the swords are physics, is kind of the idea. 3 is revolution, which I was so happy to see. I'm so sick of decks that have just the heart with the 3 swords plunged through it and it says sorrow. Because to me that doesn't align with any of the other 3s very well in the Rider-Waite deck. But here, revolution, or the notion that, because I typically tend to think of 3s as publicity and publicness, and so when you publicize ideas, you get a revolution of ideas, which is harsh, you know, so there's certainly the harshness of the old 3 of swords in this, but also the kinds of truth and reality and things like that that I think are a better meaning for the card. 4, mathematics, or structured logical thinking, which makes sense. 5 is relativity, which I love. So, you know, because the 5 of swords in the Rider-Waite tradition typically says defeat. You know, there's almost nothing good about the 5 of swords, and I think that relativity, or sort of having your typical ways of thinking what you think is true about the world being challenged, and being forced to think outside of those typical ways of thinking as a way of growing, is a much better meaning for the card. I don't remember what quantum C is, but it's 6. Chaos theory for 7 is wonderful. So you have the butterfly effect illustrated here, that a butterfly can flap its wings somewhere and theoretically could create a windstorm somewhere else. Typically, again, the 7 means trickery and deceit and theft, but I tend to think of the 7 as brainstorming and maybe politics. But it's sort of the idea that once ideas are loosed, it is difficult to have to navigate them, and you don't necessarily know where they're going to lead. So chaos theory is a wonderful assignment for that. The collider, I think, is a good way of thinking about the kind of conservatism and criticism that you see in the 8, because the Hadron Collider, you know, could destroy the world, and there's a lot of debate over that right now. 9 is a black hole, which is good for traditional meanings of nightmares, but when I tend to think of the 9 of swords, I tend to think of an all-consuming philosophy or idea or worldview, so the black hole works very well for that as well, kind of obsession. And then 10, which is uncertainty, I think works really well. It sort of talks about, this is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, I think, and it talks about how, even, you know, when we get down to the very nitty-gritty of things, we just can't observe everything. We don't know at the end of the day, as much as we can dissect things. So I think that works well for both the zealotry of that I see in the 10 of swords. That's my traditional meaning for the 10 is zealotry, as well as having to give up at some point, which is also an important lesson of the 10 of swords. And then each of the court cards in this deck are different important people in those areas. So I'm not sure who these people are, but for example, Charles Darwin here you have as the visionary. So maybe this is in physics, I can't remember. But anyway, Marie Curie is in here and Carl Sagan is in here. And I highly suggest that you check out the Science Tarot because it's really, really well done. But I'm going to run, before I run out of time, I want to get on to my second deck, which is this one. This is the Prairie Tarot by Robin Ator, or Ator, I can't remember how to pronounce the name, but this is not widely available. I think you can only order it from the artist's website, which I will post in the video, or the video details. And it is a Western tarot, so here's the back of the cards, which are this wagon spoke, this wagon wheel. I love this deck because I grew up in the West, and it's kind of nice to see a lot of the iconography that I grew up with being represented in the tarot deck. So what's really neat about it is that each of the they're playing card style. So you know, you have the Ace of Pentacles, which is here, and you have what you have to mark it as an A in each corner. Or you know, you have here the King of Pentacles. You have King up here and King down here, and it's a remarkably colorful tarot. That's kind of what I like about it. So the Queen of Pentacles, the Knight of Pentacles, the Page of Pentacles. It's just really beautiful. It's not comic book style, but it's kind of close. That's how I would associate it, probably. And you just have different Western sort of illustrations. It doesn't come with a book, but it doesn't really divert that much from the Rider-Waite tradition. So if you know and are familiar with the Rider-Waite tradition, you can follow it pretty easily. But again, I really want to emphasize the remarkable use of color in the deck, because it's both subtle but really sort of luminous at the same time and illustrates it. So let's see. These are a lot of pentacles, Ace of Wands you have here. Obviously I haven't used this very much yet. I just got this one not too long ago. It just actually became available last month, so hopefully you will find this useful if you want to order it yourself. The Ten of Wands. Let's get to the actual oh, here we go. So here are the major arcana. First and foremost, there's a jackalope included in this card, which I thought was really funny. So, you know, some cards include the happy squirrel, because that's a reference to a Simpsons episode where Lisa goes to see a fortune teller, and the fortune teller uses a tarot deck and turns over death, which she says not to be afraid of, but then turns over the happy squirrel, which she says can forebode terrible things. So since that point, tarot deck creators, some of them have included a happy squirrel card. This card is not a happy squirrel, it's a jackalope, which I think works really well for the Western theme that you have here. The jackalope is the fictional sort of rabbit with the antlers. And you can actually read with it. I think I'm going to, when I start reading with this deck, I am going to use the jackalope card to represent you know, the unexpected, or things which are unknown, or stuff like that. But anyway, so you have the World Dancer here, a circus performer. You have Judgment, or the Graveyard. Let's go to some of my favorites. You know, there's a little bit of othering going on here. There's a little bit of glorification of difference and stuff, but that's probably actually very typical of Western ideology, so maybe that's appropriate. I don't know, but you have the Star Maiden here, who's a Native American girl. The Tower is being bucked off of a horse. Very clever. Super clever, the Devil as a saloon. And the notion of temptation and kind of debauchery and things that people associate with saloons, but also the pleasure and the unorthodoxy of the Old West are embodied in the saloon as well. So I think that's a nice way of thinking of the Devil card. Temperance is this sort of doctor, this West, I guess, I don't know what you would say, but this chemist, I guess you would say, combining items. Death. I was a little bit disappointed in this Hanged Man, because to me this person seems to be in more trouble than I like my Hanged Men usually to be in. I usually like the serenity that they show, but I can deal with it because I love the rest of the deck so much. Justice. The Wheel, simple and pretty. You have this image of a windmill and all the colors of it. The Hermit. See if there are any good ones before I run out of time. Strength is nice. It's the woman and the lion looking hesitantly at her lasso. The Chariot as the coming train. The Lovers goes back to a more traditional structure. Instead of the two people in the Garden of Eden, you have the man who's having to choose, which I think is really important, because oftentimes to me this card does not represent love. It does represent choice. So I liked that they went back to the older structure of a Lovers here. And you can again see the title of each of the cards is located playing card style in the corners. More othering, unfortunately. The Emperor that you have here. The Empress is wonderful. A little bit more modern than some of the others, I think. The High Priestess. But see, just the colors are beautiful in this deck. I love it. I'm going to use it in the autumn. I think I said before in other videos, the Magician is a bit more of a trickster. That I tend to use decks that match the colors of whatever season I'm in, so autumn will be where I really jump into this. So anyway, those are the two decks that I am really excited about, that I think are underappreciated, and so I wanted to make a video about them so that maybe you can find something that you really like, and these authors should be rewarded for their work. So hopefully you found it to be interesting and maybe even inspiring. And that is that. So the Prairie Tarot by Robin Attor and the Science Tarot by those other people that I can't remember their names, but I will post whatever I can in the video description to give you links to where you can find these decks. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.